Swipe Life is a podcast about relationships. Most of us are in or long to be in a relationship. We all struggle with intimacy, sex, love, and how to communicate effectively. Swipe Life is a forum to share your dating relationship experiences. We are looking for people who want to talk about it, all of it. So we're here today with my friend. Should I use your real name, sir?
Yeah, I don't know. I have a fake one.
I'm here today with Amaker, and we're going to talk to Amaker about those topics. And for me, I guess I'll kind of start off with what's coming up for me a little bit to usher it in. I think what's coming up for me a lot lately is being vulnerable, not only in my relationship, but also being vulnerable a lot in my life and in what I do. And I think the other word that comes along with vulnerability is exposure. Mm-hmm. So I'm exposing myself to other things, and I'm talking about my needs, in relationship and also in life and in business. And so what comes up behind that for me is being uncomfortable, I think, and talking about what I want or what I'm looking for in both things. And I could see and I didn't do this last show, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it today, and I'm okay with it. It's just that I'm a recovering guy, and I'm in a 12-step fellowship, so I'm sober. So what comes up for me is how it looks being vulnerable, feeling those feelings, and maintaining sobriety in a lot of different areas at the same time, and noticing how when I'm not getting what I want or I feel really uncomfortable, I want to act out, I think, a little bit around those feelings. Mm-hmm. And seeing how that's playing out for me, and how, not only drinking and drugging, but other things, might get in my way, and how I could use those to check out, and that ultimately derails me. Mm-hmm. And so I guess it always comes back to like having a program or maybe integrity, and some people that listen who aren't in, a recovering program can mm-hmm. identify with the word integrity around my actions and behaviors, and that being a really important thing for me lately, or always. But I think if I am acting out, or if I'm drunk or I'm high or whatever, I don't see how important it is. I only feel a lot of anger and frustration.
Yeah. No, well, I think that there's a lot of good said in that. I guess the difficulty is figure out that stuff at first. I think the thing that's great about the program is that you take a step back from the behaviors and you really try and understand what's going on. And I found that a lot of it is based off of shame. It's like I find that, the reason why we escape or hide from something is because we're avoiding feelings or the shame that we feel about feeling a certain way. And, because we live in a society that often tells us that we can't do. And then you're like, in this it puts us in this idea of what's normal. And normal is like there's no such thing. Everyone has their stuff. And honestly, we're approaching a new generation where everyone just kind of wants to be themselves. And so you see a lot of I see this a lot with the young people nowadays, where they're just freely expressing who they are and ridding themselves of the shame. It's like that has plagued this country for years. Mm-hmm. And
well, Amaker, this is Sandy, by the way.
Yeah,
hey Sandy.
Hey there. I'm out here at the engineering station pushing the buttons. But in regards to shame, so I don't know, what's a key practice for you in just accepting the fact that you might be in a shameful space, and how do you make peace with that so that you can, I guess, let it go? Do you have a practice?
Yeah, I meditate every day for an hour, which I find that when I wake up a lot of times, and there's a lot of those false voices, the fear that plagues our minds, for me, it's like right away. As soon as I wake up, it's like, you can't do this, you're not that, blah, 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 And once I get still, it's a lot of times I feel like, I wake up anxious, and a lot of anxiety is just all of that building up because it needs somewhere to release, or, you need to quiet the mind is what meditation does. And so during that time, I kind of it's funny because it's quality time with myself, and I feel like I kind of go through each thought at a time, and it's like this sentence, I go through this one, and then I draw it out, and once I like, once I think about it, and then I go, well, what is that really, like, what's really going on there? What am I really feeling? And then I go, oh, I'm feeling this because of this, this action. I did this thing yesterday, and that's making me feel.
Thank you, Sandy's phone.
Yeah.
Hey, we've got fans.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's our fan mail.
That's
I
great.
love the show. Who is this amateur guy?
Yeah.
And what does he mean, Shane? Well, can a quick follow up to my original shame question is, I mean, in a nutshell, how would you say that the shame, affects relationships with other people, romantic relationship, friend relationships, any kind of intimacy based relationship?
Well, a lot of times it's like, I feel like you create stories. You know what I mean? Like
I don't
something,
know what that's like.
Sure how. A lot of times, something goes on, like, there's something, your spouse will do something, and then you'll sit back and you'll be like, well, why did they do that? And then you start, all these stories start to go on in your mind, and you just create this whole reality for yourself that doesn't really exist. And then, and then once you actually have a conversation, you realize, oh my God, I just made up this whole entire scenario in my mind. And I think a lot of that, shame, because in my experience, like, I know there are certain aspects of, like, I wasn't able to talk as a kid. Communication wasn't really encouraged. And so that was foreign to me. And I felt, it's like, and everything, like, when someone told me something, they said something or they told me to do something, it felt shame-based. It felt like I was being shamed because I didn't have a voice to communicate, and I was always told what to do. If you know anything about me, I really don't like being told what to do. So,
yes, yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Even though you never said it, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah,
that like that.
Yeah.
I had a similar, my experience with that, where I remember at times being prompted and really encouraged to share how I was feeling, except it really wasn't modeled for me, so I had a lot of trouble with being able to do that, and it wasn't able to be brought out, in me, I think. And I wanted to go back just to something that you said, because I was curious originally when we started talking about society, maybe telling you that there were certain things that you could or could not do. So, like, what for you are some of the things that you feel like society sort of told you in your life that you can't do, that you're doing, or that you want to do?
Well, a lot of things. Being gay is one of them. Like, that was a big one. I grew up in the church, and so there was a lot of shame around that, because it's just like, I was told that it was an abomination, that, it was a sin. And it took a lot of work and therapy and, talking to get rid of that shame, because it's naturally who I am, and I had to learn to love that part of myself. Also, like, I started off dancing for 23 years. Like, I did dance for 23 years. And then, I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm done. I've always wanted to act and sing. And, working in the industry, I was like, I want to sing now. And so I started going to singing auditions, and they were like, oh, well, come to this dance call. And for me, that felt like, no, I don't want to go to the dance call because I'm at the singer call because I want to sing. And, and society does have this way of putting you in a box. They're like, well, you're a dancer, so be a dancer. And I'm like, no, I can do these other things. And so I just left. I left, the industry. I left Broadway, and I went, and I was like, I'm going to go do singing competitions. And I just started singing, and I was like, because that's something I needed to do for myself. I needed to, I wanted to act, so I went and left, and I was like, I'm going to go act now. And I did it, with the help of others, but kind of on my own. I didn't have representation. I didn't have an agent. And, it's like, I had, a part of it was also proving it to myself, because society had told me so much that you can't do this, you can't do that, but you need to do it this way. And I was like, but that doesn't feel right to me. So I needed to go do it to prove it to myself and to everyone else. So it's like, no, you can actually do it this way. Don't let people put you in a box. If your heart is telling you to do something, follow that.
Yeah. I think it's a struggle too for a lot of people to really to be completely authentic and to find your voice. And I think about that sometimes now. I'm coming up again on a point in my life and where I promote myself as a personal trainer, to where I might want to say something and I'm not sure what it is I want to say, and it's a real tie-in for me between the physical and spiritual, and how I want to present that, and how can I present that in a way that's a little different from a lot of what I see today on social media. And that's a road that I want to start to walk down, and do that. And then it's just figuring out, how to do it. And I've been here before, and this is where like sobriety plays a big role in my life, because I notice patterns where I get to a place where things are really going well and things are looking really good, and a lot of it has to do with because of being honest and authentic and vulnerable in my life and speaking my mind and being true to myself. And something happens where and my girlfriend brought up the other night where we sabotage ourselves.
Yes. Yeah.
So you get to a point where things are really going good, and all of a sudden just sort of something happens and we sabotage ourselves. And I feel like I'm at that point again a little bit, at least in those areas, and I'm being very vigilant, to the fact that, like, okay, where's the sabotage coming in? What might I do to derail myself in a way? I'm trying to be hyper aware of that.
So I can completely relate to that. But one of the things that I'm very careful of is choosing the words that I put around my actions. Like, even though and you said the word sabotage, and to me that just it's a little harsh for what I would like to say. I was like, I look at those as those are lessons. I was like, because I listen to a lot of famous actors and what they talk about as far as their journey to becoming actors, and like, they always say fail forward. It's like life is going to be a bunch of failures, like, and then eventually until you learn from it and then you don't do it anymore. And so those moments I look at as like, well, that was a lesson I learned. Even if, and the fact that you're aware of this action is a step forward. So then you can take another action to move away from that action that you've been doing. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, I personally don't like the use of the word sabotage. It's like, but it tells me like, well, why am I doing this? Why do I want to like go back to this pattern? What's coming up for me? What's dictating that action that I want to do? And so it can be a very reflective moment, to go sit down and go, okay, so normally when I do this, when I get to a certain place, I do this. Why? What's coming up? What is, and then we always have a choice. It's like, well, I can make a choice to continue to make that action, or make a different choice, and do something else. And, sometimes it's like, and it's not going to always be, since you like one time you might make the right choice and then you go back and make the other choice. And it's like, that's just life,
Exactly.
And I think, again, we have to get away from that shame as well. It's like, because we go, oh man, I messed up, and then we beat ourselves up and stuff. It's like, yeah, I did this. I failed forward.
Yeah. I find like, sometimes there's a certain degree of lack of noticing of one's own humanity.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to areas and when you're in a lot of 12-step programs. Sometimes I think too that like I could easily forget that I'm a human being, and I'm subject to all kinds of thoughts, feelings, actions that might not be, quote unquote the best thing for me, but I'm a human being, and this is like what I do.
Well, there's this like this is perfectionism. Like this, I feel like, especially in this country and with your media, there's a like this idea or this standard of like, you have to be this. And it's like, and I grew up doing that. I was like, for me, perfectionism was huge because I was like, well, if I'm perfect enough, if I do this, I was like, I went to Juilliard. I was like, if I get on Broadway, I have a resume that I could. And I thought if I did all those things, my family would accept that I'm gay and it would be okay. And, it was like to fill up that, and it was just, I was destroying myself. I was, I wasn't happy, and this also was a lot to keep up with. I was like, I wasn't allowing myself to be a human being. I wasn't allowing myself to like be flawed, to the point I was like, I had to have the perfect body. I had to, I had to have the perfect career, it's like, and even growing up, it's like, I had to have the perfect family, it was just all of this. And
it's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it is.
So they accept that you're gay. I know
we're working. We're working on it. My father's come a long way. The rest of my family seems to be pretty cool with it. They have their religious views, you know,
Right.
which we're just gonna leave that alone. You
Okay.
know, like you guys can have your religious views, but when you start to impose them on me, then you know that's a whole other thing. But yeah, like we're working on it. It's a work in progress. It's a lot better than it used to be.
So with your father, it's just not dinner table discussion.
Yeah, it's not. We I don't know if we've had one dinner where I kind of just blew up, and you know, but we put it out there, and you know, it was like I think it was just a lot of I was holding a lot of stuff in, and I kind of just let it out, you know, and I didn't expect to, but you know, it was just I've never had the opportunity, and it was years of, you know, and it was interesting, but it's interesting also.
And you had already at that point, though, you had come out to them. You were out.
I
to
kind of
them.
got caught, so
okay.
yeah. So there's that.
Right.
You
So
know,
you got caught.
with another guy
Got it.
by my father
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, my.
In your house,
in my dance studio.
in your dance studio.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my.
Yeah, scandalous. Yeah, it was a very awkward ride home. You know.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so he came to pick you up at the studio.
Yeah,
I'm
and-
guessing, and he kind of walked in.
Yep.
Got it.
And
I see.
and I tried to play it off because there was a bathroom right next door, and so the other guy ran out the exit, and I ran into the bathroom, and he had apparently seen something, and I was like washing my hands, and he knocks on it, he's like, you know, like Everkirk, you know, get out, and I'm like, 1 second, I'm just washing my hands.
Trying to think of like
Right,
something, like
try
a
to, like,
story,
yeah.
like I'm washing my hands for the next
Yeah.
25
Right.
minutes.
I was like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm like, I'm almost done. You know, like I had been in there for a minute, and you know, it was a little traumatizing. You know,
Yeah.
it was well,
Sure.
because I wasn't ready to tell him. You know, I had just started to understand and I just figured it out. You know, and I was just exploring it.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it's like, and you know, and I grew up in a West Indian household. So in the West Indies, it's very much there. It's very religious based, and it's very much like, oh, you can't, you know, like homosexuality is an abomination. It's a sin, so it's very frowned upon. And you know, and like I had all that going on, like I was like trying to come to terms with it. You know, and I'm not trying to paint my parents in a bad light. Like they're
No.
very, you know, they're good people. They again, they did the best with the information that they had at that time. And again, we're working, you know, it's
Sure.
still, and it's progressing, it's moving
Right.
forward. But I feel like that's kind of our jobs as the younger generation, is to help, you know, like we learn from our elders, but we also teach them at the same time. And so this is one of those moments where it's like, you know, and it's just like, and I look at it as like raising a child. You know, when you're raising a child, it takes time to teach them something, but you're raising a child who already has a certain mindset already set, so you have to reteach, and that takes even longer.
Yeah, it's
You
a
know.
it's a challenge.
Yeah.
You know, that's a good way to look at it. That's a good way for you to look at it, I think, and that's a good way for you to look at it, and also preserve the relationship that you have, you know, with your dad, which I think is really important, because if anybody's going to learn anything, right, you have to continue to have a relationship with
Yes,
them
exactly.
in order for them to hear the message. So, and I think, you know, coming from a loving and understanding place is probably the best way for anybody to
Yes,
hear the message. So that's
Oh yeah,
that's
You-
cool.
You hear that, country? Coming from a loving and understanding place.
Yeah. So, as I understand it, you're a single man now,
I am single.
right? Right.
Yeah.
And currently dating.
Yeah.
You're-
like
you're-
I'm dating. I'm having fun. You know, like it's a lot of stuff. I mean, not that crazy, because my focus is actually my career. I'm very focused on my career, but in the meantime, you know, when we have needs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and you know, I don't know if I'm in a place to do anything serious, because we were together for 5.5 years, and that ended last November. So, you know, there's definitely moments of like last night, I was very lonely. I could have used a cuddle buddy.
Right.
But you know, it's like, but I'm also learning to be okay being by myself.
Yeah.
You know, and for years I hadn't done that. I mean, I've always been like a very independent person. But I used sex to like feel comfortable, or to feel that need, and I didn't understand. I thought sex was intimacy, because growing up, I wasn't allowed to, like, I didn't have a boyfriend. I didn't, you know, I couldn't like go on dates. I couldn't go to the prom, you know, with a guy. So
Right.
everything that I did was in secret.
Right.
You know, I used to like skip school and, meet up with guys, and and that became dating to me.
Right.
That was a gay relationship in my understanding. And so those patterns, it's like, and then when you get older and you start actually dating, it's like, that's not really dating.
Yeah.
Sex became intimacy, and it's like, it's not the same.
Sounds like it's a hard thing to really shift out of, and I hear it.
Yeah.
That's what I hear a lot from my other gay friends as well, and I think it's just a shift from like living more in the shadows as teens and kids, where they were very impressionable and a lot of things get molded, to then jump into a place now where in today's society it's much more open or more free, and then to move it from the shadows into the light, so to speak, and to have that experience.
Well, I kind of, like on my Facebook page, I kind of opened up. Like, it's weird because, I didn't realize that I could be myself. And I found social media actually helping me with certain things. Like, because, I struggled with depression for a while. I struggled with, because once I realized that the sex thing was an issue, I had to stop. And then that was like my little blanket, and all of a sudden it's gone. And it's like, so you're left like raw and exposed, and, and all these feelings. And,
right.
So I,
how did you? So you're saying you used sex as a way to soothe yourself, right?
It's still a way. It's like it's just not the only way. Like for a while it was the main. It's like that's how I did it.
Right.
And when I finally realized, and the thing is, I think it's cultural. Like for me, I'll say my experience was very cultural. Like in the Black community, I could not be an actor who's openly gay. At least that's what the mindset I grew up with, and I still see it struggle. Like there are certain, I won't name any names, but producers and people who I'm like, y'all are kidding me, right? This man is clearly gay, but they can't really come out because they'll lose their audience, and that's why I was.
Will they? Do you think that they would, if they did?
I don't know. Like, it's certain people. I think yes, it would drastically affect their following, because in the church is very at least, again, I haven't been in church in years, but from where I left it, they're very homophobic, like in the Black church. And it's like it's there, it's like very obvious, but people just, they like to, it's kind of like, we don't talk about it, and that kind of thing. And I think but I see it now in younger generations that it's something that's being addressed. It's something that they're like, we're not accepting this anymore, and that's also, it's affected the attendance of the church, because it's like, if we can't be ourselves, then we're not doing this. I haven't been in church in years for that reason. And even though there are gay and lesbian churches out there, it's like, there's still a lot of trauma around being in a church. It's like, I remember I went with my ex once, and it was a gay and lesbian church, but they, someone got up and started praying for someone. I just heard like, is he ordained? Is he, like, I mean, all these, because there were so many rules. There were so many, like, you had to do this, you had to do that way. You had to pray a certain way. You had to, like, it was just so, it just felt like unattainable. Because the idea was to be holy, but the only way to do that is through Jesus Christ. And it was just things, but Jesus Christ is so far away, and you can't, like, you'll never ever reach it. So it's like the idea of always striving to reach it, but at the same time, like, it's like when you watch kids, and if they continue to do something over and over and over again, and they fail over and over again and never get any kind of reward, it beats you down. And so that's what it felt like. It's like, I'm just failing to get this thing that just never seems that I'll ever get, and it was beating me down and I was like, and at the same time telling me I have to be perfect though, so it was this really crazy cyclical monster.
Early in our I'm jumping in here.
Yeah, jump.
So early in the conversation, you used the words, love myself, be myself, authentic self, words that you used, Tal. And so the question that I want to, ask you in terms of the 5.5 year relationship that you had, and showing up for yourself and for the relationship, I mean, do you have sort of like a mini inventory that you could share with us about, here's ways that I really showed up for myself and the relationship, and here's where I could do better?
I would say, yeah. I mean, there's a lot I could say I could do better. But honesty, like the first thing that I was not honest with myself or my partner in the beginning of the relationship. You know, and a part of it was because, well, he wanted monogamy, or that was the, I'll say that was what he wanted. I said I would try it, and then I tried it for like, a couple months and then didn't, and and that just like, it spun out of control, and then I finally had to I had to come clean. I had to be honest and own up for my actions, and that that broke the trust, and we spent a lot of time trying to rebuild it, but at the same time there were other issues that just started surfacing and manifesting. I mean, it was also, this is my first long-term relationship, so I learned so much about
5
myself.
years, right?
Yeah,
It's a long time.
like, well, I had gone from like dating guys for like a month, a couple of months, maybe the longest like 3 to 6 months. I don't even think there was a 6 month. I had like friends that were in my life for like a year or so, but it wasn't a relationship. It was like friends with benefits. And this was the first time I had ever really, and I really, I love this guy. I still love this guy. But we just weren't ready to be together, or
Right.
I wasn't ready for this kind of relationship, this level of commitment, because I didn't understand myself. I'd never had the opportunity to really, do that. I think growing up, the thing why I've been fighting for my creativity is because it's the only thing that's ever really gotten me through life. Like, it's the only thing that's been consistent, and so I focused on that. I didn't focus on relationships. I didn't have, my relationship with my family wasn't so great, so I never had a guideline for it either.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So even when, this piece of it too is always, because I don't know how I would be where, so you tried to be committed to him, and it didn't work, and so how long would you say that you were, like, so you were sleeping with other guys and you guys were still together under the assumption that you were being monogamous?
Yeah.
How long did you do that for?
Gotta. Oh, like 3 months maybe.
All right.
Yeah,
okay, and you
maybe.
right, you kind of tried it out, and,
Yeah.
and do you think so? While you were doing that too, was the thought process like, what was your thinking? Like, was it like, oh, like this is what I need to do for myself, or
Yeah, like, well, because I kept saying this over and over again. I was like, well, I told him in the beginning that I don't think I'm not really monogamous. So when I tell him, it won't be that big a deal. I had to, I was trying to convince myself that it was okay.
Right.
Because I was like,
But you were like, I'm committed to you. You were like, I'm committed, and then you weren't.
yes.
Okay.
I said I said I would try, and
Right.
the impression was that I was doing it, and I was
Right.
not.
So, I mean, I will commend you too on the fact that, okay, so you made a mistake, and you owned up to it, and
Yeah,
that's, and you were honest, because look, you could have just stopped and not said anything.
Very true. Yeah.
So what came up for you around that, like where because you had a choice, you
Yeah.
could have been like, I'm not going to say anything,
Yeah.
or you said, I'm going to say something. So what was it in you that made you decide that you really wanted to disclose it?
Well, I wanted to. I wanted to, like, I wanted a real, honest.
Right.
Like, I was like, I was like, I love this guy. I want a real relationship. I want to, like, be myself. And I was like, I started to understand. I mean, it got to be a lot too. Like, because I was lying to cover this lie, and
Right.
and he also could, he, in the back of his mind, I think he could tell. Like, and I could see, like, it was just driving him crazy, because he was. And I was very good at, because of my growing up, I learned how to manipulate very well. And so he felt like he was being manipulated, but because I was like an expert, didn't realize, it just, like, wait, what was I saying? Because I was so manipulative, like, he had a feeling, but he couldn't, like, really prove
Right.
it.
He couldn't say you're
Right. doing
this, but
Right.
he felt it.
Yes.
And-
So
So my question about your you sort of like knew this thing about yourself that I don't think I'm into monogamy. Mm-hmm. Well, and now where are you at with that now? I mean, do you feel like it's just a preference? I prefer to have sex with multiple people, but have an intimate relationship with one emotionally. Or do you think that your desire to have sex with other people was a way of avoiding intimacy with that special one?
That's a good question. It's complicated as well because, and this is something I still ask myself all the time. I'm like, I think yes, there's definitely a big part of it that was like avoiding intimacy. Also, because I didn't know what that was, So, and I thought, like sex was intimacy. Um, but at the same time, I am a very curious person. So there's a part of me that believes that, in life we I felt the best or the freest when I'm constantly learning, when I'm constantly experiencing new things, and we treat that with everything in life. Well, not except sex, but a lot of people don't. They treat sex like and there is a level of intimacy in sex that you don't have in other things, but at the same time, I'm like, there are sometimes, I've had experiences when I've met a guy and I'm just like, there's something so fascinating and I'm really drawn to you and I don't understand why, but I want to understand that a little bit more. And that includes sexually for me. Um, and I think it's a disservice to ourselves, as people who are growing and learning. It's like that, maybe like there should be a level of monogamy to build trust. And so we have that kind of connection within the relationship. But, just like, it's forever. Like forever is a long time, like to never be able to try something else, to never be able to experience another person, and what that can do or what that'll teach you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like I've learned a lot through sex.
Yeah, it's an interesting question to be asked. And I know for me, I think I'm at a point where I've experienced it, and sometimes that thing that like that I was very drawn to from a person is the fact that they're unavailable. That for me was something that I sort of uncovered, that kind of odd, that something that they had was that the fact that they were just not able to be present, and there was something in me that wanted to draw that out in them, and there was something in me that wanted to like be that special person to someone who maybe would never find anybody that special or whatever, to become that, I think. And anyway, that's just where I'm at right now. And things could change, and for me to go on the road of like discovering one person and seeing where that road leads and where we can go, but it's just it's different for everybody.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I do think each person has, it's going to be a different experience for everyone. Because, it's like, as much as it can be like the whole idea of being attracted to something that's unavailable, it's like, I feel like I've been with people who are available. And also, it's not necessarily just based on that. It's sometimes, for me, it's been body. Like, it's a different, it's like, when I go to a different country or a different culture, it's like I want to experience the culture, and sex is a part of that. It's like, or different, like, because we go through phases of like, I remember like the men that I was attracted to when I was younger, I'm still attracted to, but then I'm like, I see this over here and I'm like, ooh, that's new. I've never tried this before, and for some reason I'm really drawn to it now, and I'm like, why? I feel like in some ways I do a disservice if I don't explore that a little bit, if I don't try and understand what's going on, because I really do believe that when we repress aspects of ourselves or we deny, certain things, it shuts us down. Like, we're not living authentically. We're not living as ourselves, as fully integrated humans or beings. And so being able to have that freedom to explore something that is interesting. It doesn't have to be all the time. I'm not saying like, and you can, if it's within a relationship, you and your partner can discuss the guidelines of where that's safe and where it isn't. It's, in that sense, it's like, yes, there's a level of commitment toward another and a compromise.
Sure. I think there's also a knowing, right, of a knowing and knowing yourself enough to know what that might do to the thing you already have.
Right.
And trying to balance it out and seeing like, that's a big risk. That's a big risk to take, perhaps, to maybe this won't last. This great thing that I have won't last because
But
if I choose to do that.
it can, that I think, again, that's based on the relationship. Like those, that's what,
Absolutely.
you define within the relationship. I think where we run into trouble as a country sometimes is that, try to force our model of a relationship onto someone else's, and it's like, what those two people have created together is their business and their, and so being able to, you know like if they decide, I trust you, you trust me, um and I want this, I think you want this too, and then maybe they talk about it, and then because I think the most important thing is communication. It's like, because you can have those experiences and then go, well, that wasn't as great as I thought it was,
Yeah.
and here's why. And being able to talk to your spouse about something, then that to me is like one of the deepest levels of intimacy. It's like, if we can go out and explore something, out sexually outside of us, and then come back and have a conversation that's not harmful, and because then you're still learning about yourselves, but you're also learning more about each other.
I think that is very, very. I think it's possible. I think it's very, very few, though, instances where it can be successful over a long-term period of time. With that being said, I think that in general, very, very long-term relationships, I think you find there are few and far in between that are really successful, where people do like really, really love each other the same way that they did years ago. I do think it's possible. I think that perhaps, it's less likely.
Well, I think something that you said is interesting is that, so love, I think, is going to look different for many different periods of life. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we run into, is that we expect love to feel the same way it did 5 years ago. It's like, we're talking about time, and you're talking about overtime, and things are constantly changing. It's like, love is going to look different. Even with my ex and I, it's like, the love that we first had when we first met was, very, it was the honeymoon phase.
Right.
It's like, and then, we went through our stuff, and we still fought to be together. That was a different kind of love, and we're separated right now, but we're still very much a part of each other's lives. We have 2 dogs together. We have bills, and showing up for one another, even though we're not together, like paying the bills and making sure that the dogs still have their insurance and all that stuff, is a different kind of love. Right. So I know, like, and I don't know if we're done. I try not to set any expectations. But yeah, it's like, I think if we get comfortable, like, and the thing that I've been working on is getting uncomfortable with uncertainty. Because the thing I feel that a lot of people do within relationships, is that they try to, it's like kind of they try to protect the relationship by not doing certain things, because they're like, it'll make the relationship last longer, or this person won't leave me, blah, blah, blah. It's like, the person might leave you anyway, like, you can't control that.
No.
So it's like, if you're open and honest about who you are, and and then also willing to let each other explore and grow together, I think, and I've seen this actually in a lot of gay couples, like a lot of older gay couples that have been open, and they have a level of this kind of intimacy that has worked for them, and openness. It's something that it does. I think it does work. It's just, it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of patience, and also vulnerability. Like, the being able to just, like, accept, like, this is who he is, this is who this person is. It's like, and get used to the fact that you will be hurt in relationships. Like, I think that's, like, we go, oh my God, he hurt me. It's like, well, how much, yes, there's a threshold of how much pain you can handle within a relationship, but the expectation that the person that you're spending the rest of your life with is never going to hurt you is like a fairy tale.
Absolutely. Of course. Yeah. I think anybody who doesn't know that, I don't know, I don't want to make a judgment call about them too, but I think that's something that needs to be realized in order to actually be in one.
Yes.
Like, that would be a great thing to know before you, kind of get in one.
Yeah.
And to have a clear understanding of that.
I think it can be hard to know beforehand, because each person is different. They're wired. So there are gonna be different things. Like, I look at some of the things that would upset my partner, and I was just like, why? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. But he has his own experiences and own set of, like, history and trauma that that does affect,
Sure.
that triggers certain things. And
Absolutely.
it's like, and I had to just go certain things. I was like, this, this is insane, right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm not wrong, but it's
Mhm.
like, then I had to just go, but if it bothers you that much, then I'll stop or I'll
Sure.
do something else,
Yeah.
and that's where the compromise comes in. It's, my idea isn't necessarily saying that we should always get what we want. It's like, no, but if we have a desire, we should be able to explore it. And then with communication, we decide, okay, well, that's too much for me. But it takes a level of honesty to be able to really sit down and talk to each other.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I know for me, like I couldn't have that. Like
Yeah.
I it would have not worked for me.
Yeah.
Like on any level to have that go
Mhm.
on. Like I just don't think it would. So it's just interesting, and I'm more power to other people like
Well, that's
who can do that. But I know myself enough to just be like, no,
Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah,
It's not gonna work.
Yeah, I think. Well, it's. I
think there's more difference between like is it more successful? Do you think for gay couples to have that happen
I
than
think
perhaps like straight
I
couples?
mean,
Is
I
that
don't know. Like, I mean, I think definitely. I think in a way, yeah. I think I don't know. Like, again, I haven't been in too many relationships, so I'm definitely not the expert on this. But as I see in a lot of the gay communities, like there are a lot of open relationships,
right?
and it's the idea of like, we're two men, and we
Mhm.
don't. And I feel like I went through this period. I was like, why am I trying to replicate my gay relationship based off of a heteronormative relationship? Because that's the norm. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't feel right to me. It never has felt right to me. And I don't understand. So it's like, no, and I don't think even heteronormative like heterosexuals should do it. Like, I think they should define the relationship that they want for themselves.
Sure.
So it's like,
and it has to fit. It has to all fit.
yeah.
Now, I wanted to go back to, so this point in your relationship though, where, you got honest with him about it, right?
Mhm.
And then, so that was early. That was really early.
Yeah.
And then you guys continued on for years. So, I mean, when you told him about that stuff, what was his reaction?
I mean, no, I broke his heart.
Yeah.
I broke the trust. I broke his heart. It was tough. It wasn't easy to like even be there afterwards. I was he shut down, shut me out, and I was fighting to get back in. And then I went through a little bit of a depression myself because I started to then I really tried to be monogamous, and I was like, oh my God, like I'm thinking that if I do this, he'll want me back and he'll come back, and that wasn't the case. I mean, also that's when I really realized I was like, this is just not who I am,
I see.
and I mean, at least right now,
Right.
I don't know what'll be in the future, but I'm like, I'm not, and that's being honest to myself. I have to I was like,
So, but you realize that in that relationship
yeah,
that you couldn't be monogamous. So you did your thing. You came back. You disclosed, that you were with other men, and he broke his heart, and then you guys are back together. But then you did realize though too that the monogamy wasn't gonna work for you, right?
Yeah.
While you were in the relationship with him.
I think he saw how much it was just like a struggle, or maybe
Right.
and I think that he was, because there was a point where he was like, look, let's start over, but do you just be honest,
Okay.
and I was like, okay.
So he opened it up.
Yeah,
He agreed to open it
he
up.
was trying to make it work with me,
Right.
and and then but the thing for me was there were a lot of, being honest was difficult, because I still had the,
Yeah, what did that look like? You were like, I just,
well, yeah,
how do you even
I had
discuss that?
Yeah, well, I had the first. I mean, we went to couples therapy, we went to group therapy. Like, we did a lot. We fought to make this work, and I had a lot of It's like being honest is a practice. I had to learn how to practice doing it, because even from my childhood, there was a mechanism that when I was younger, whenever my parents would ask me about things pertaining to gay or whatever, or where I was in school, during school hours or what happened. Like, I remember I came home with a hickey once, and I actually decided to tell my mom before she saw it. Like, I was like, "Oh my god, I got a bruise like from this lift I was doing in dance
That's
class."
so funny.
Yeah, and
I was
like
gonna say I got a
just
hickey one time, like this really nasty hickey, and I made up a story that said that I said my friend and I were wrestling in his room. He pushed me on his bed, and a clock fell onto my neck and scraped my neck.
Yeah.
And my parents were like, "Oh
Okay,
yeah." I
yeah.
don't know if they like
Yeah.
they were great with denial though. So like
Yeah.
who knows? They could have been like, "The clock. Did you see what it
Yeah,
did
that's
to
about-
him?"
right.
Oh,
And everyone else is
such
like,
a
"That's
such a clock
They're like,
just,
"Yeah,
just
honey."
scraped his neck like that. Jesus.
That's so funny. No, my mom knew. My mom,
What
like,
kind of clock is that?
I got caught in the doors on the subway, and they pinched my neck.
Right. They
My-
just
my-
pinched.
They pinched so hard.
I got attacked by a cat and it clawed me on the neck. It's
I think-
just crazy.
honestly, I think my mom knew.
Yeah.
I think she was like,
Sure.
bullshit. Like, she's like, honey, yeah, sure.
Right,
You know,
right.
but you know that's how I learned how to. I like, you know, I was premeditating, you know, to like cover my ass. And when you get into a relationship and you don't undo that habit or that mechanism, it goes with you. You know, so whenever he would ask me something that, you know, made me uncomfortable, I would automatically just lie. It was like, and I didn't. It was like a, you know, I wasn't aware of it. It was like second nature. And so, you know, it took a while to
break that.
break
pattern.
that, yeah. And
it's a
especially
tough
with
one.
him because I had already started it.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it worked. I guess it worked for a time between you guys.
Yeah,
until
I
it
mean,
just-
it was a lot of like I would lie and then like come back 10 minutes later and be like, that wasn't the truth. You know, like
Good
this
for
is
you.
yeah. But after a while, it still, you know, it got to him a lot.
Yeah.
You know, because
Now, the lying part, or just the fact that you was just
that I was
doing-
lying.
that
yeah,
you were lying.
Period. Like
Yeah.
there was a very big thing for him. It was like just
Yeah,
don't lie.
Sure.
But you came back 10 minutes later. No credit for progress?
I mean, yeah, but the progress, you know, like it happened, but I guess it wasn't happening quickly enough because it happened a lot, you know, like the 10-minute thing, and then after a while that becomes like, all right, that's, you know, becomes enough. It's like
Yeah.
So it seems like after the not being monogamous thing came out, there was a period in the relationship where there was maybe a lot of harm going back and forth in the relationship.
Absolutely.
And today, the way you describe the relationship, the nature, the dynamic of the relationship, there's a relationship. I heard you describe it that way when I first met you a couple of years ago. But is it the same as it was a couple of years ago when you've been in this stage in terms of how you described it? But maybe is a difference from 2 years ago to now. I mean, is there harm going on in the relationship now, even though you're not together, but you do have, you know, dogs in common, and there's a relationship still, you say?
Yeah, I mean, well, we've set a lot of boundaries, so I feel like it took a minute to like figure out what boundaries. Like, you know, we mostly communicate through text. Most of the time, like if he has to pick something up, I won't be there. You know, like so we're not really seeing each other. We try to keep the communication about the dogs or business. You know, and you know, there have been moments of like, yeah, like harm, you know, happened. Like, I guess like I went to cat sit, you know, and I stayed at his place, and that was a lot. Like it was just like, and it was too soon, and you know, and I was just like I kind of broke down. You know, I went through a little bit of a, you know, I went through a moment, and yeah. So I mean, but those are things that I had to learn. I was like, because the thing is, the honest, the truth is, like, there's a part of me that still wants him in my life. So how do you find the balance, you know, that keeps both of you feeling safe, you know? So I think that's where I'm at now. And it took a little like, okay, you know, right now we're on like we took a break where I was like, I just can't see you, you know, and that was, you know, it was tough, but it was something that is a boundary I had to set for myself because I know I needed to detach.
Right.
And it's still a detachment, you know, detaching process.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you know, what I see and I want to acknowledge, though, is just the you know, the continued showing up and continuing to try to be honest, even though it's not perfect, you know, and I really appreciate the fact that you're able to be messy. I really like that, right? Like nothing's perfect. Like, and it reminds me that like it's okay to be messy, because also, and I shared a little bit about it like the last time on the last show, that like, yeah, I want it to be perfect, right? Like I want this to be perfect. I want the business to be perfect. It's not. It's a big mess. It's not a big mess, but there are messy moments, and the more though that I'm able to, show up, and the more I'm able, like, you put myself out there, the more I'm able to really be vulnerable, it's like the more, gifts that I get coming back to me. So I want to, thank you for that. And we're getting ready to close, and, thank you for sharing, everything coming in and standing in this really hot box with me. It's really hot in here.
Yeah, it's hot. How is the box?
It's hot.
You know what? Eddie made the box hotter than Amaker. I just want to say, I'm just saying.
I don't know if I like that. I'm a pretty hot guy.
Right. No, you are. I don't know. Eddie might have been like, he just worked out. Eddie had just worked out,
So
and maybe
did
his.
That's
Sorry.
okay.
Okay. Well, but thank you, man,
I'm messing with you guys.
for doing this.
Yeah, of
All right.
course. Yeah,
Great.
definitely.